Hey everyone, Chris Sawyer here. Welcome back to the Varietal Show. We have an amazing wine selection today from Tablas Creek Winery in Paso Robles. I am here with the great Jason Haas of the great Tablas Creek Vineyards. Jason, thank you once again for having me. You know, it was fun doing. We did another session. If you didn't see it, please tune in to that one where we talked about the great pink wines and the white wines of Tablas Creek Vineyards. Here we are in Paso Robles, one of the great wine growing regions of America. And you know, Jason, you and your family have done a great job. You had a big anniversary last year. You know,
we did 30 years.
30 years, and I got to go to that tasting. And you know, Jason was nice enough to go around the nation to some of the great areas and to really showcase the wines, and that was before 2020 hit, so he could go a bunch of places, you guys. And I was lucky to be there. It's really kind of just, you know, it's just like me being so enamored by these wines. Jason's the same way. I mean, you and I have tasted old wines together from this winery through the years, and they're just amazing. And the red wine program here is this very special one to me. I've learned so much about grapes because of this, and these are the grapes of the Rhone Valley. So the as we spoke in the last segment, we talked about Tablas Creek being a partner, Jason's dad partnered with the great Perrin family from Chateau de Beaucastel in the great Châteauneuf-du-Pape region of France in the Rhone Valley. The Rhone Valley is one where the amazing river comes out of the Alps and then drops down to the Mediterranean, but it's really that kind of higher area there where you've got a lot of different kinds of climate conditions, some of which are super rocky and hot up on the top part, and then you get down to the amazing Châteauneuf-du-Pape region, and it's warm during the day, don't get me wrong, but it's actually what really keeps it in check is this wind that comes out of the Alps, whips down. It's called the Mistral wind, and it's heavy duty. Man, I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever said this on my show, but when I went there the first time, I felt like I was wearing a toupee because I felt like my hair was being pulled off my head this way, that I was a little concerned about that wind, and it was serious. But you know that in a lot of these vineyards there, you will find this amazing thing where it's old riverbeds there, and there are these round rocks, and they're kind of flat and round, but the fact is they conduct heat, and so that heat from the day is being concealed in there, and it actually warms them up, keeps them going for a little while longer. Yeah. But it always makes me feel like I'm going to get a sprained ankle just looking at them. But anyways, you know, it's a little bit different here. Tell us a little bit about the conditions right here at the estate here in Paso Robles.
So those rounded river stones in Châteauneuf-du-Pape are called galets.
Galets?
They are not actually native to that part of the Rhone. They got rolled down by the Rhone River from the Alps when the river was draining the glaciers during the ice ages. Jeez. So that was the point at which the valley opened up, because it's a fairly narrow canyon north of there, so it was tumbling fast. Yeah. And then you get to Châteauneuf, the valley opens up, those rocks settle to the bottom, and the river just flows on. So it's all of these stones that sit on top of some topsoil, which sits on top of this kind of crumbly, flaky limestone clay, which is absorbent. I'm going to do a trick here for you all. Okay, I'm addressing the camera directly. Watch what happens. I'm going to pour water on this rock, and then I'm going to hold it up, and you can watch it get absorbed. So, you can see.
It's sucking it right in there, you guys. That's amazing. Its retention of water is interesting. I mean, this is such an interesting rock.
So this is now, the surface is dry, and it's not because it evaporated, it's because it absorbed. So these rocks here pick up 50% additional weight in the winter because of all of the water that they hold. And it's one of the secrets of why we can dry farm here in Paso Robles. It's also, its chemical composition is favorable. It's probably more technical than your listeners really care about, but anybody who wants to know, yeah. I did a long piece on our blog earlier this year that dives into the chemistry. But yeah. There's lots of reasons why soils like this are found in a lot of the great wine regions around the world, whether yeah. it's Champagne or Alsace or Burgundy or Chablis or Saint-Emilion in Bordeaux, or Tuscany, or Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
Right. Amazing. It's just this kind of stone here, this calcareous stone, is so interesting. It's like chalk almost. I mean, that's what it is.
It's the same stuff, chemically.
It's chemically chalk. It's hard chalk.
It's anywhere from the same, it's calcium carbonate, it's chalk, all the way up to limestone and marble.
Yep.
It's all the same stuff, just depends on how much it's been heated and compressed underground.
Exactly. So this is really the kind of signature red wine from the winery, and this is the amazing Tablas Creek 2018 Esprit de Tablas.
You're one of the first people to get to taste this vintage. I hope you realize that.
Oh
and
my
you
gosh.
all are one of the first people, some of the first people to get to watch us taste this vintage.
So this vintage has 40% Mo Vedra. We're going to go into these grapes in a second. Syrah is 27%, 23% Grenache, and 10% Counois, which is a little bit less known grape. I mean, us geeks know it, but it's a very interesting complement. So tell us a little bit about these 4 grapes and why they play such a great role in this wine.
So, Mourvedre is kind of the core and chewy, meaty richness around which we base everything else.
I like that.
Grenache is juicy and exuberant, a little bit licoricey, kind of plummy, cherry, black cherry. It's got good acid.
Yeah.
Syrah is dark and spicy and wild, kind of pepper and pancetta and black fruit. And then Counoise is kind of zesty and spicy, generally low in alcohol.
Yeah.
So I think adding it to a blend is a little bit like squeezing a dash of lemon onto a dish of food. It's not necessarily that you're trying to taste the lemon.
Sure.
It's that the higher acid that you're bringing brings out all the other flavors that are there.
Right. That's great. Now, I mean, the nose is so beautiful. It's very attractive, but it's also got this a little bit of intensity to it. You know,
it's brooding. I think.
And especially because it's young. I mean, we really are tasting this. I guess I am the first of the non-winemaking team, and the great Neil Collins, wherever Neil Collins is here. I have to say hi to him later, but you know, for you guys to have tasted it, I feel honored to be one of the first, other than someone that works here, to taste this. And you know, it's always been one of my favorite wines. I taste these wines every year that you guys make. You know, there's variations. This is not always the exact blend, and in fact, Mourvedre has come up a lot in some of the blends. Grenache is always one of the main ones too. So you've got these two are your kind of key ones. And it kind of reflects a lot of what was going on down in the Châteauneuf-du-Pape region, which is more Grenache Mourvedre based than up in the north, which is Syrah based.
And Beaucastel is famous because of the amount of Mourvedre that they use.
Yeah.
I mean, Jacques Perrin, one of his many contributions to the world of winemaking is that in the 1950s, he went and found where Mourvedre, which had been the dominant grape in Châteauneuf-du-Pape in the middle of the 19th century, found where it had survived the phylloxera plague, brought it back, grafted it onto newly developed rootstocks, and planted it in the vineyards of Beaucastel.
No.
So he did this with all of the traditional varieties from Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but Mourvedre was the one that he really fell in love with. And it's one of the only estates in Châteauneuf where they use as much Mourvedre as they do Grenache.
Yeah.
And we follow that model because
Yeah.
we believe that when it gets ripe, and that's non-trivial.
Yeah.
I mean, Mourvedre ripens really late, but when it gets ripe, it's without peer.
Yeah, we're going to go into more detail in that in a minute because I did get Jason to bring out a bottle of Mourvedre, which they also bottle just by chance, and it's always been one of my favorite wines that you've made, and it's just so unique. You know, Mourvedre has been in California for a long time. It's also called Mataro, as the old farmers called it, and it goes back to, you know, basically around the turn of last century, with a lot of the things like Grenache was here, a little bit of Grenache Noir, and these
more than a little actually. There was
actually quite a bit.
20,000 acres of Grenache planted in the Central Valley at one point.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It was the key ingredient of Gallo Hardy Burgundy.
Yeah,
and the other wines like it in the 70s and 80s.
You go back to Zinfandel, obviously being the first trademark grape of California besides the Mission grape, which is already here. And then you had Petite Syrah, which is a variation of Syrah and a different one from the south, which is really interesting. But I think that Mourvedre, just in learning so much about it, I mean, it's really because of Chateau de Beaucastel that I've learned so much about it. It's a great grape, and it's really kind of the trademark of this winery. I mean, tell everyone where we're at in relationship, because we're kind of actually close to the coast. How far from the coast are we right now?
So as we sit, we're 11 miles from the coast. So the town of Paso is 10 miles east of us. Okay. The Pacific Ocean is 11 miles west of us.
Okay.
So we're in the foothills of the Santa Lucia mountain range.
Yep.
So you go another 4 miles west of here, the mountains are 3,000 feet high, and then it slopes down to the coast.
Yeah.
But those mountains are really key to the climate of Paso Robles because they're pretty unbroken.
Yep.
So that holds back the fog and the direct ocean influence. It's not like the Santa Maria Valley or Petaluma Gap where you have fog that comes through every day.
Right.
Here, it warms up. I mean, it's low 90s today.
Yep.
It's supposed to be 90s all week, but it'll cool down into the 40s at night because there's no cloud cover, there's no moisture, and that heat just radiates right off.
Yeah, you get a lot of UV rays. I mean, they
sure do.
You sure do.
There are times where it feels like you live on the surface of the sun.
Yeah. It's an amazing thing. If you guys could see really what we're looking at out here, I mean, there's the hillsides here. You've got slopes on this property. This is not a flat property, not flat ground at all.
No, not at all. I mean, that was one of the things that we wanted because we felt like having those hills would give us different facings, and it's a pretty diverse collection of grapes. So things like Syrah like it quite a bit cooler than things like Grenache and Mourvedre. So having south-facing slopes and west-facing slopes where we can put the grapes that need extra heat and sun, and also having east and north-facing slopes where we can tuck the things that like it cooler is valuable. Yeah,
I think it's great. The flavor profile of this is wonderful. It's young, but man, it's got some amazing potential just right off the bat. I mean, I'm loving. There is that a big kind of darker fruit kind of characteristic, but then there's that freshness kind of sliding in on the bottom, like a lot of like kind of more black raspberry and some really kind of wild berry kind of flavors that are kind of cutting underneath it. It's got great acidity. It's got this long, rewarding finish that is so good, and that layer of spice. Damn it! I just I'm feeling it right now. So,
all these grapes are spicy.
So, I know.
Yeah, and 18 was for me, a particularly kind of lifted vintage. Yep. So there are years that are more classically Californian, like 14 and 17, which are luscious and creamy and textured and juicy, and they've got that loam and earth character. But these cooler years like 18 give these high notes that I think are so exciting.
Right. I think so too. I mean, it's just it's a very special vintage, I think, for all of us. And I think 19 was a very good vintage too. And 20 a little bit more challenging, as you'll all find out. But I was so happy.
Though less difficult down this far south.
Yeah, and I will say that too. I mean, that's the thing, is you're already done.
We're done. You're done. I mean, the nearest fires were like 70 miles away from us. So even though we saw some smoke, it was up in the upper atmosphere. It wasn't at the surface. We don't think we had smoke taint issues. So it was there were a couple of big heat spikes that everybody had to deal with, but by and large, I mean, I'd look around at what everybody else had to endure. The other wine regions in California had to endure in 2020, and I'm pretty grateful that I was here.
Yeah. You know, for the last round, we were talking about white wines and your program here, and your fabulous pink wines, of course, the rosés. What do you like? What are some of your favorite things that you've had with the Esprit Red?
So,
as far as food pairings go,
the thing, like, Mourvedre is great with any kind of slow cooked meats.
Yeah.
So we have a recipe on our website that's one of my absolute favorites, which is kind of a Provençal style beef stew.
Ooh.
So
I want some.
Yeah, that's kind of a slam dunk. If you ask the folks in the Southern Rhone, they'll say definitely have it with duck. But who cooks duck? I mean, I'll get it at restaurants.
We got a little bit. We got Liberty Duck up north, but you know, it's true. But I mean, these kinds of slow cooked meals. Think about what we're getting into, you guys. This is going on wintertime. This is how we're going to go about it. Is cooking, slow cooking. I think a lot of us, because of 2020, have actually gotten pretty good in the kitchen. You know, it just we didn't really have a choice, but we did. And I think this is the time where we get to experiment a little bit more with these kinds of casseroles, stews, slow cooked meals. And I think that you know, I appreciate vegetables and everything so much these days. You know, just everything tastes good. you know, because we have time to actually enjoy it too. I mean, it's an interesting time, this 2020. But I think we've all learned a lot of lessons and appreciation of life, and especially when you've got great wines like this amazing Esprit. And this, we were talking about it, is your dad named it that because he feels it's soul. It's Esprit. It's like, instead of spirit, it's more of like, it's soulful. You know, it really is a soulful wine. It's got these 4 components of these grapes that are grown right here. This is organically and biodynamically farmed here. Very natural flavors. You know, I love that Neil and you and the team here, you keep your hands off as much as possible. You know, you have great barrel programs and all of these things, but they're minimalist intervention. It's more about tasting what you picked and putting it in a bottle.
Yeah, I mean, we feel like whether it's something as simple as the collection of yeasts that are native to this environment, that's a piece of what's going to make our land unique. And then we're fortunate for the style of wine that we want to make that these are not varieties that really need a lot of oak.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we will age them in large oak barrels, but the barrels are so big that there's not a lot of oak flavor that they impart. So you can actually taste the fruit, taste the land, taste the vintage, and not taste our winemaking.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big lesson I've learned from you guys, is just the size of these barrels is bigger, and it's really the impression that the oak is making is not as much as a small barrel would make. And that's a really important thing, to really taste the real character of not only these varieties, but also the vineyard itself. Yeah. So I think that's great. So
cool.
Cheers on that one. Jeez. Great new vintage. Wow. And just even these sips are opening up a lot.
Mourvedre is not a great, even like Syrah, but the classic example is Cabernet, where the tannins can be so big when the wines are young that you've got to give it time before you can approach it. Mourvedre is not like that. The tannins are substantial, but they're chewy. They're not hard. So you can open a wine like this and enjoy it in the first year, no problem. If you want to wait 2 decades, you can do that too.
Yep, exactly. So this next wine that we're tasting is the kind of the current vintage of the Tablas Creek 2018 Mourvedre. So this is an amazing grape variety we were just talking about. It really is something that you guys have made such a big impact in bringing cuttings of this over to the United States, the more modern style cuttings that came over from the old world. In many cases, we have no idea where the old cuttings came from. They came, we know that, because there are a bunch of old vines out there, but we're not sure exactly.
We can guess because of the name.
We can guesstimate, the Mataro and where it came from, Mataro or Mourvedre, but these are some really fine cuttings that you guys have made such an impression on people, and we go to California, around California, where Rhone varieties are very popular. You see a lot of these Tablas Creek cuttings that are the ones that were propagated to grow these vineyards here in California in the today, and same thing up in Oregon and places all around the nation. So I think this is a really great opportunity for us to talk a little bit about Mourvedre by itself. You love this grape, don't you?
I do. Yeah, it's true. I have to admit it. So we're mostly a blend house. Like 80+% of what we make is blends.
Yes.
But we realized pretty early on that most Americans didn't know these grapes very well. Yeah. And we'd sort of started with 3 strikes against us. Yeah. We were growing grapes that people didn't know and couldn't pronounce. We were putting them into blends that didn't have a category. Yeah. And we were in a part of California that people had never heard of.
Yeah.
So there's some things, other than that, it was easy.
That's 3 strikes.
There's some things you can't do anything about. I mean, we're here in Paso Robles because we feel like this is has the best raw materials for where to be. But we realized that it was up to us to give people toeholds into these wines. And one of the ways that we felt that we could do this was, let's pick a lot or 2 each year that's really characteristic of a grape that we love, bottle it on its own, put it on the label so that people start to get to know it, and then find opportunities to show it to people so that when they see that a wine is 40% Mourvedre, they don't just think, oh, that's one of those blended grapes. Yep. They think, Mourvedre, I had that. It tastes chocolatey and earthy and loamy, and it's got dark red fruit, and it ages really well. Like, I had one of those. And we realized in our tasting room pretty quick that people would come in and be like, yeah, Mourvedre, no, I don't really know that. Well, let me pour you one.
Yeah.
So we've been doing it on its own most vintages since 2003.
Yeah.
And we feel like every grape needs somebody to stand in front of it and wave the flag. And if we can do that for Mourvedre, we'd love to.
I have a few bottles down in my cellar I'm very happy about, but the fact is, you know, I'm going to share them with special people because I feel it's a very special, it's a special grape. And this wine ages extremely well. I have noticed this through the years. You and I have tasted through this and all the great things we do with the Hospice de Rhone and the Rhone Rangers organizations, with which Tablas Creek is a great member of both of those organizations. And please find out more about them by visiting those websites too, Hospice de Rhone and the Rhone Rangers. But, you know, just really following this pattern of how these grapes mature, you know, in the bottle, you know, over time, and this finished wine can be such a beauty as it really opens up. What were some of the impressions that you got in following some of the library selections through the years that you were, damn, this is good?
So the thing about Mourvedre is that it starts with this kind of loaminess that hints at where it's going.
Yeah.
But you give it a little bit of time and it tastes like leather and truffles.
Yeah.
And, the tannins just get softer and silkier. And it still maintains that fruit. It's incredibly resistant to oxidation. Yeah. And the reason why people who might make a wine that's only 5 or 10% Mourvedre, if you ask them why they include the 5 or 10% Mourvedre, they'll tell you that the antioxidant characteristic of the grapes